Hi, folks. Welcome to Meet Up with Austin. I'm Austin Furman with my very unique guest, Zev Yaroslavsky, who is from 1974 to 1994, LA City Council member in 1994 to 2014, the Los Angeles County Supervisor for District 3. So Zev, you have a very accomplished career in public service. Can you tell us about your childhood and how it formed you to have such lifelong commitments to public service?
Well, I was born in Boyle Heights and raised in Boyle Heights for the first 8 years of my life. My parents were both Hebrew teachers, Jewish educators in New York, and then when they came out here to Los Angeles, that was what they did for a living. They were labor activists. My dad founded the first Hebrew Teachers Union in Los Angeles. Both my parents were very active in the Zionist movement, the creation of the Jewish state in Israel. And so my upbringing was in a house that was rich on values, not rich in anything else. I think you would call us not poor, but lower middle class at the very best in those days. All of our discussions were about social justice issues, politics, policy issues, history. My dad was also a history teacher. So my values, both from my parents and from my upbringing in the community of Boyle Heights, which was a diverse community in those days, significant Latino population, Japanese population, still a Jewish population in those days, and some white Russians who had come here during the 20s and 30s. So it was a very diverse community, and people there valued relationships. Most of us didn't own television sets in those days, and so the relationships that you developed were personal, and you spent a lot of time socializing with people, organizing on behalf of causes. My parents were residents of Boyle Heights when Ed Roybal was elected to the LA City Council. He was the first Latino to be elected to the City Council in the modern era of Los Angeles, and it was a coalition of Mexican Americans, Jewish Americans, and others in the Boyle Heights community to elect him. So that was my upbringing, and certainly it has informed my life and my values in so many ways. The values you formulate in your early years stay with you really forever.
Was there one person who really affected you the most, more than anyone else? I mean, you said your dad was a history teacher.
Well, my parents, both of my parents, my mother died when I was 10, but I had 10 good years under her tutelage, and my dad. They were both very influential in a personal sense, in politics and in education and things. I had a lot of people who were influential. I had some great professors here at UCLA who really were terrific people and taught me a lot about how to look at problems and how to contextualize issues, not just look at things individually, but out of context. But what's the context of the times? And I was an economics and a history major at UCLA, and got my master's in history as well. And so I had a number of educators, a number of professors who were very influential in my time. And then in politics, several people who were influential in my life. Former Senator Scoop Jackson, Henry Jackson from Washington, with whom I worked when I was active in the Soviet Jewry movement. Howard Berman, Henry Waxman, people who taught me a lot over the years.
You mentioned your UCLA years. Can you talk a little bit about your student activism at UCLA while you were a student?
Well, yes. The time when I was here at UCLA, which was from 1967 through 72, as an undergraduate and graduate student, very tumultuous times, both on campus and in our society. We had a war raging in Vietnam that every student had a stake in, especially male students who were subject to being called up for that war, and we were very active in that regard. I was also very active on behalf of Jews behind the Iron Curtain, Jews in the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union. And I had two aunts who lived in the Soviet Union, a grandmother who lived in the Soviet Union, And as a young boy, I was always interested in, why can't they come visit me? Everybody has a grandmother and an aunt and an uncle, and they get to go visit them, they get to go visit us. We can talk to them on the phone, but we couldn't talk to our own grandmother or our own aunt or uncle on the phone for a variety of reasons, not least of which is the Soviet Union didn't allow it. And so I had this obsession about why people behind the Iron Curtain, especially Jews who were persecuted and discriminated against in the Soviet Union, why that was the case, and then what could I do about it. So as a student, I formed an organization here on campus that ended up being a federation of student organizations all over California to advocate on behalf of Soviet Jews. We marshaled people for demonstrations. When the Russians came into town, we would picket them, and when a Russian ship came to the harbor, we would picket them. One time we even rented a dinghy in the harbor and went and spray painted a Russian freighter with the slogan, let my people go. And it was an effort to put pressure on a superpower to mobilize public opinion in support of our cause, and later to actually use the United States Congress to pass a law, which was passed by Scoop Jackson, that tied favorable trade agreements with the Soviet Union to free emigration. It was called the Jackson Amendment to the U.S.-USSR trade bill back in 1974. And so I got very involved in that. I spent most of my waking hours, if I wasn't studying, and some of my professors would say I didn't spend a lot of time or enough time studying. I spent all my waking hours working on behalf of Soviet Jews, running the organization. Ultimately, we developed a national organization. Got my taste of politics in those days too, lobbying Congress on the Jackson bill. It was a great time. I was too young and too stupid to know that you can't beat a superpower, and it turns out we did.
Mr. Yaroslavsky, I have to ask you, what was it like to be elected to city council at such a young age of 26?
Well, it was interesting. I had a pretty full life by the time I turned 26. I traveled a lot. I'd been to the Soviet Union 3 times. I risked my well-being when I went to the Soviet Union a couple of times. I had a worldview. I had been exposed to politics. I had worked for the McGovern for President campaign against Nixon in 1972, and so I had a taste of it. When I ran for the city council in 1975, nobody gave me a chance of winning. There were 2 major candidates who were running, both of whom worked for Mayor Tom Bradley. Every elected official, except for 2 of them, every elected official in the area, including both U.S. senators, were supporting my opponents. I wasn't even given a sliver of a chance of coming in second or third or fourth, but I worked hard. I had a base of support in my community. A lot of the students here at UCLA supported me. I had some friends who gave me $50 or $100 towards my campaign. I didn't raise a lot of money, but I walked precincts. I walked door to door every day, 7 days a week, rain or shine, for 6 straight months. And over a period of time, I surprised a lot of people, including myself. I honestly, when I started, didn't think I had much of a chance, but I wanted to get this idea of running for office out of my system, and that was a perfect time for me. I was out of college. I was at a pivotal point in my life. I was married, but I didn't have any children, and my wife and I decided, if you're going to try it, this is the time to do it. So a funny thing happened on the way to the rest of my life was that I got elected in what is still a legendary election, one of the biggest upsets in the history of the city of LA. And what was it like? It was, when I came to the city council, there were several members of the city council who were old enough to be my grandfather. And, to their credit, they treated me as an equal, and as they should have, because I had the same vote that they did. And they were very welcoming to me, and I was not at all intimidated. If I wasn't intimidated by the secret police of the Soviet Union, I wasn't going to be intimidated by being in this new environment as an elected official in City Hall. But it was a great experience, and an opportunity to help govern the second largest city in the United States, to represent the community in which I grew up for most of my life. After I left Boyle Heights, I moved to the Fairfax area where I've lived ever since, and to help steer the community that I live in, and also the city that I live in the positive direction. It was a heady experience, and but as I like to say, I always took what I did seriously. I never took myself too seriously, which is a good thing for most people to live by, a good adage to live by.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the presidential election, very historic election that just finished. What was going on in your mind when you were watching Trump getting closer and closer to the 270 mark for electoral votes?
Well, I wasn't surprised, and there are a lot of people these days who say they knew it was coming. I can tell you that I gave a speech on election day to a group of people before the returns started coming in, and I was asked what I thought the results would be, and I said it's a 50-50 pick'em. At a time when most people thought Secretary Clinton was going to win, I had this. It wasn't just a sinking feeling, but it was based on evidence. The battleground states were very close, in some cases, within a point of each other, and depending on who turned out to vote, who didn't, could determine the election one way or the other. People have a high level of anxiety right now, all across the country, especially in the Rust Belt, where people have lost their jobs, don't have the ability to regain a job in which they had worked for many years and have been trained to do, whether you're a steel worker or an auto manufacturer or a coal miner, and I didn't think that the Democratic Party was speaking directly and empathetically to those people who turned out to be the key swing voters. So I was surprised but not shocked. Surprised because my heart was telling me that the Democrat was going to win. My head was telling me that I had no business making that assumption, and so I wasn't shocked by the result. And now we have the consequences of it, and we'll see how that plays out in the weeks and months ahead.
Why do you think Clinton lost? What was the main issue that caused her to lose this election?
Well, virtually anything could have contributed to her loss, because she only lost by 107,000 votes in those three states, right? In Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, which if she had won those three states, she would have won the election. She lost all three of those states by 107,000 votes in the aggregate. It's less than 1%. So, it's what I often said, that if you're going to lose a football game or lose a tennis match or lose an election, it's better to lose it by a lot than by a sliver, because if you lose it by a sliver, you'll spend the rest of your life replaying every decision you made, and that's unfortunately what Secretary Clinton is now going through. What were the reasons? I think the principal reason was I think his message was better than her message. And I'm not passing judgment, obviously. I was a supporter of Secretary Clinton, but if I ask you what was her message, I defy you to give me a 1 or 2 sentence response to what her message was. You know what his message was: to make America great again. And for people who were out of work, for people who were underemployed, people who were steel workers who are now sweeping streets.
Stronger together, but there's...
Yeah, but you tell me what does that mean?
Yeah.
Obviously, it wasn't enough. So I think the Democratic Party in this election did not speak credibly to alienated and anxious voters in the heart of the country, in the heartland of the country. Something that Bill Clinton knew how to do, and this time it didn't work that way. So that's the overarching reason. I could give you 1,000 reasons. Would it have made a difference if she had campaigned more in Michigan and Wisconsin? Maybe. Would it have made a difference if the FBI hadn't gotten involved in this election in the way they did? Maybe. But it reminds me of use a sports analogy again of a football game where a team lost in a last-second field goal and after a fumble, right? So the team fumbles and they ask the coach, why did you lose? Is it because of the fumble? And he said, no. It was prior to that fumble, there were 59 other minutes that entailed that game, and we made a lot of mistakes in the first 59 minutes, not just in the last minute when we fumbled the ball and gave the other side a chance to kick the field goal. So when you lose by a hair like that, there is any one factor could have tipped the balance, and but we shouldn't have been in that situation. It shouldn't have been that close. Given what this guy stands for and what he did during this campaign, we should have beaten him by 20 points, and we didn't. So, you got to look at, not just what happened in the last week of the election or the last 2 weeks of the election, but what happened in the previous 3 or 4 years, and how could that have been different? But it's not going to change the result. But you got to analyze why this happened so that we can go forward and have a chance of regaining the Senate, if not the House, certainly the Senate and the White House in the years ahead.
Yeah, one of the topics in this year's election was homelessness. Because of the passage of Measure HHH, do you think that'll help homeless people in LA get the necessary services that they would need?
Sure. Measure HHH was a $1.2 billion bond issue, which can only be used for the building of housing for homeless persons in our community. It'll build close to 10,000 housing units for those folks. And that's not going to solve the problem, and it's not going to get solved overnight. The problem didn't arise overnight, and it's not going to get solved overnight. But for the first time, there's some real money now behind the construction of housing for homeless persons, and that's critical. And what's also critical is providing services to those individuals. Most of the homeless that we have on our streets, especially the chronically homeless, people who've been on the streets for more than a year, is that they have other issues. They're not just homeless, but they're homeless for a reason. Most people don't volunteer to be homeless, but some trauma has hit them in their life. They've lost their job. They have a mental illness. There's been some issue in their lives, a family issue. I remember talking to a homeless person in Hollywood one time and asked him how he became homeless. He said he was taking care of his mother, who owned a small single-family home in Pasadena. She got so ill that he couldn't take care of her anymore. They had to put her in a convalescent home, and in order to pay for the convalescent home, they sold the house. And once she passed away, he had no place to live. And after they sold the house, he had no place to live, and he couldn't afford a place to live. He was an unemployed veteran of the Vietnam War, and he ended up on the streets of Hollywood. And so that's a trauma in that guy's life. Everybody's got a reason they ended up on the street. It could be alcoholism, it could be mental illness, it could be drug addiction, it could be a physical ailment, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, could be any number of things. And in many cases, it's more than one of those things. So, it's homelessness is a major issue for the country, and it's very much a major issue in Los Angeles because we have the largest number of homeless in any community in the United States.
I'm curious, Mr. Yaroslavsky, with all the public service history you have in your background, why you didn't run for mayor a couple of years ago?
Well, a couple of years ago, the County Board of Supervisors, where I served for 20 years, from 1994 to 2014, is actually a more fulfilling job than being mayor of Los Angeles. A lot of people don't believe that and don't understand it, but being a member of the County Board of Supervisors is probably the third best local government job in the United States after mayor of New York and mayor of Chicago. Mayor of Los Angeles we have a weak mayor, strong city council form of government. I served on the city council for almost 20 years, and I can tell you that the mayor, while he has or she has a lot of influence and authority, doesn't run the city. The city council runs the city here in LA. In New York and Chicago, it's the mayor that has all the authority. In the county of Los Angeles, which would be the 8th largest state in the United States if it was its own state, 10 million people, budget of $28 billion, bigger than many countries on the globe. The Board of Supervisors, a 5-member board, runs the county. There is no elected mayor in the county of Los Angeles, and every issue that affects our society, whether it's transportation, homelessness, law enforcement, incarceration, child welfare, health, public health, environment, all of those issues cross the supervisor's desk, more than one time every day. So, and you can do something about it. You don't have to worry about a city council overriding you. You work with your board to get things done. So why wouldn't I run for mayor when I was already a county supervisor? Why would I have run? It would have been really at best a lateral step, a sideways step. It would not, maybe even a slight step down. You're more famous when you're the mayor. More people know who you are when you're a mayor. More people know what a mayor is. They don't know what a supervisor is. But in terms of actually doing things and getting things done and affecting policy that can improve the lot for every man, woman, and child in our community, the county is the place to be. That's why I didn't run.
You mentioned how big Los Angeles is in terms of population, bigger than a lot of other states in the U.S. and even some countries in the world. What are some of the challenges a supervisor faces?
Well, all those issues that I mentioned. Child welfare has been a real serious issue for the county. We have, I don't know what it is at the moment, but we had 25 to 30,000 children who were under the in the county's child welfare system, foster care, one form of care or another, where they had, through no fault of their own, run into some difficulty in their lives. And the county is the parent of last resort. It's a terrible thing to be dependent on the county for your parenthood, but that's the way we're set up. So if a parent or both parents or whoever your guardian is ends up being incarcerated or becoming dysfunctional because of an alcohol or drug abuse problem, the county is going to take that child away and provide care for that individual. We've got a lot of problems with that system, and a number of children who have not survived that system, which is a real challenge for the county. The county is the social welfare arm of society all over the country. That's what counties do. Counties provide for the people who are on the economic margins of our society, or in any other way on the margins of our society. The people who have fallen, through the cracks, abused children, the poor, people who don't have health insurance, people who are incarcerated. The county is largely the social arm of or society's social welfare arm for a big chunk of the population. Some 2.5 million people in this county fall below the poverty line, and it's the county's responsibility. So those are some of the challenges. Protecting the environment is a challenge. I represented the western part of the county, which included the Santa Monica Mountains and half the coastline of LA County, from Marina Del Rey to Ventura County. I spent a lot of my political capital trying to protect the Santa Monica Mountains to ensure they're preserved for future generations. Expanding the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area, the California State Park System. And if we couldn't get it into the public domain, if it were privately owned properties, to strictly regulate development of those properties so that if they do develop it, they do it in a way that is compatible with the environment, doesn't destroy the environment. So that was an issue. Transportation, of course, has been a huge issue for LA County. Traffic congestion and transportation, public transportation in particular. Each member of the County Board of Supervisors serves on the Metro Board, the MTA Board. So developing funding mechanisms to expand our rail system, our busway system, has been a principal responsibility and challenge for for a county supervisor. So in 2008, we put the third half-cent sales tax on the ballot and got it passed. It takes 2/3 of the people to approve a tax in California, and we got that approved by the voters of LA County. And just this past election, the voters once again voted for another half-cent sales tax to accelerate the development of a public mass transit system, as well as to expand our highways and to fix our streets and do the kinds of things that we need to do to make this region livable as the population continues to grow. So that's a major challenge. The fun part of the job, but also a challenging part of the job, is that LA County is the cultural arm of the county. We own many of the cultural institutions of this region. The Hollywood Bowl is owned by the County of LA. The Music Center is owned by the County of LA. The County Museum of Art is obviously a county facility. The Natural History Museum in Exposition Park is a county facility. And we have a lot of privately owned cultural institutions in this town, but the backbone of the cultural mosaic of LA are publicly owned facilities. So I've had the privilege of being very involved in the remodeling of the Hollywood Bowl, making it a 21st century venue for the performing arts. Up until recently, it was really a 1950s venue. I was very instrumental, very involved in the construction of the Walt Disney Concert Hall, which is an iconic, after a little over 10 years, is now one of the most iconic cultural institutions in the world. The expansion of the County Museum of Art is something that I take pride in having helped induce, and the rebuilding of the oldest institutional building in LA County, the Natural History Museum in Exposition Park, which is now a 21st century venue in a 1913 shell, is very exciting. And the arts and culture in Los Angeles is very important, not only to our soul and to our ability to communicate across ethnic and language lines, but it's also a huge economic engine. The arts employ more people today in LA County than the defense industry does, and 25 years ago you couldn't have said that, not even close. So we have a great opera, we have a great symphony orchestra, we have great plays, not just at the Music Center, but in some of the smaller incubator theaters that we have all over the region. Arts and culture are a very important part of what Los Angeles is, and it kind of paints a picture of who we are for future generations.
Yeah, another thing you were instrumental in was the expo extending to Santa Monica. You have to be excited about that.
Yeah, that was a project that I was involved in for many, many years, and thanks to the passage of Measure R back in 2008, the half-cent sales tax, we were able to complete the expo line basically from downtown to Santa Monica, a couple of blocks from the beach. It's been hugely successful, far greater than anybody anticipated. Last I checked, the expo line was carrying 45,000 or so passengers a day, which is huge, and it's going to be, it's growing every month as people get used to it and realize that you can spend 2 hours a day in your car going to work and 2 hours a day getting home from work, or you can spend an hour in each direction on the Exposition light rail line and transfer to the blue line or to the red line. Or, every time we build a new segment of a transit line in this town, we're not only serving that segment, but we're connecting that segment to the rest of the transportation system. So when we extended the light rail line, on the Expo light rail line to Santa Monica from Culver City, we didn't just connect Santa Monica to Culver City. We connected Santa Monica to downtown, to Pasadena, to Long Beach, to the San Fernando Valley. So it's a whole that is bigger than the sum of its parts. And the Expo line was the first transit line, public rail transit line to be built in the west side of Los Angeles since the red car was dismantled back in the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s. That was a huge deal. We had a lot of opposition to it, just like we have opposition to the extension of the subway, and from your school board. But once we got going, once we built it, you don't hear a lot of negative comments about it, other than it's overcrowded, which it is, and that's something that Metro needs to deal with. But I'd rather it be overcrowded than empty. And one of the things that we've demonstrated at Metro over the years is that Angelenos will get out of their cars. There's a myth that Angelenos would never get out of their cars. They'll never divorce themselves from their single occupant cars. It's not true. Angelenos are not stupid. If they can get somewhere from point A to point B in less time via public transit than they can in their car, and at a fraction of the cost, they'd rather do it the cheaper and more expeditious way. Why wouldn't they? Some people will never get out of their cars, but what we find is on the Expo line, we found it on the Orange line in the San Fernando Valley, and when the subway opened, is that a significant percentage of people who use that are first-time users of our public transit system. And I think the faster we grow the system and the more comprehensively we grow the system, the more people will get out of their cars because it offers them more options to get from point A to point B to point C to point Z than they have now. So we've got to build a better mousetrap than the car, and we're in the process of doing that.
Wrapping up, meeting up with Austin, I'm curious, Mr. Yaroslavsky, do you have any parting thoughts for the younger kids, the younger generation that maybe want to pursue a career in public policy?
Well, I think you gotta, we're looking for people who want to be involved in public policy. We're looking for society, America is looking for people who are less concerned about getting rich than they are about enriching people's lives. And politics, policy, not just as an elected official, as a staff person, as a citizen volunteer, as a member of a commission that sets policy. We're looking for people, America is looking for people who care about the next guy, not about themselves so much, but about their neighbor. And I really encourage anybody who cares about making a difference in their city, in their county, state or country, or in the world, that you find a niche and pursue it. There is no reason in the world why anybody can't, in this city or in this country, if you work hard enough and you're persistent enough, to be able to land in a place where you want to land, where you can make a difference. And there, whether you're a teacher or you're a police officer or a firefighter or a social worker, or a staffer for a congressman, or a person who wants to have a career as a administrator in a city or county or state, we need people who are ready to do big things and who are ready to do things that are bigger than themselves. So I can speak with some experience. I got into politics at a very young age. I was elected at a very young age. I made a career out of it, and have not regretted 1 minute of it, and maybe 1 minute of it. But I wouldn't trade it in for any other walk of life. I just look around my own city, my own county, and I can see that my fingerprints on so many things that we've done, and the fingerprints of my colleagues that I've worked with over the years. I know what was important to them. I know how hard it was to get the subway built in the first place. That was Tom Bradley's vision. He didn't live long enough to see it, become what it is today, and the system become what it is today. Or Marvin Browdy, my colleague in the city council, his vision to create a Santa Monica Mountains park. In the 20 years that I was on the Board of Supervisors, we added 20,000 acres to the open spaces of the Santa Monica Mountains. Wouldn't have happened but for Marvin Browdy's vision and the work he did, Congressman Bielenson did over the years, Senator Cerroti did over the years. So I am a trained historian. That's what I got my graduate degree here at UCLA. So I tend to look at things through a historical lens, and when I see stuff around town, I just don't see it in the snapshot in time that I'm driving by it, but I think of how did we get to that point at this particular moment? How did that park get built? How did that highway get extended? How did that light rail line finally get built after all the tumult about it? How did the Hollywood Bowl get built in the first place? When you think about the Hollywood Bowl today, be hard for most people today to imagine that back in 1921, the first Hollywood Bowl was a shack. The stage was a shack, and there were no seats. It was just a natural bowl. People sat on the hill and they watched the orchestra play in the shack. And when the season was over in the summer, the shack, got worn out and destroyed by the elements during the winter. They built another shack, and it wasn't until the late 20s that they actually built the shell, that the iconic shell that we recognize today. This is a great city with a very rich history. Even though it's a young city, it's a great city, and it has a lot of chapters that have been written, and a lot of chapters yet to be written. And so for young people, I would say, get your pens and papers ready, because it's your turn to write the chapter, and if you want to, you can.
Zev, thank you.
All right, my pleasure, Austin. Thank you.
Zev Yaroslavsky, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Austin Furman, and we'll see you next time on Meet Up with Austin.